Imagine waking up every single morning to a stranger tapping a bamboo pole against your bedroom window, not knocking on your door, tapping the glass, on purpose, for money. This was a real job, a full-time career. People got paid to be human alarm clocks because alarm clocks didn't exist yet. And that's one of the more normal jobs on this list. We're talking about corpse thieves, professional sin absorbers, and a man whose entire career was managing a king's bathroom visits. By the end of this video, you'll be very grateful for the career you have now. Before machines, before modern medicine, and before basic conveniences we take for granted, someone had to do these jobs by hand. Every strange career on this list existed because of one simple gap. Technology hadn't caught up yet. No alarm clocks meant someone had to wake you up personally. No refrigerators meant someone had to cut and store actual ice. No modern medicine meant someone had to supply doctors with leeches or bodies by any means necessary. These weren't jokes. These were full careers, passed down, unionized in some cases, and taken completely seriously. Let's start with the ones that just sound old-fashioned and build toward the ones that sound almost criminal. Town crier. In medieval Europe, town crier was the original news broadcast. Before newspapers, radio, or television, a single loud-voiced official stood in the town square and shouted the news. Royal decrees, tax changes, wanted criminals, even public executions were all announced by one man with a very strong set of lungs. Criers were legally protected. Harming a town crier while he was delivering an official announcement was treated as a crime against the crown itself. Miss the announcement and you had no other way of finding out. There was no rewind button on a shouting man in a square. Lamplighter. In 18th and 19th century cities, lamplighters walked the streets every single evening with a long pole and a small flame, lighting gas lamp after gas lamp by hand. Then, every morning before sunrise, the same worker walked the same route in reverse, putting each flame out one by one. Some cities employed dozens of lamplighters working in relay, timed precisely so the entire city lit up like a wave moving through the streets. The job vanished almost overnight once electric street lighting arrived, and an entire nightly profession simply switched off. Ice cutter. In North America and Europe, ice cutters spent winters cutting massive blocks of ice directly out of frozen lakes using saws and hand tools. These blocks were hauled by horse-drawn sleds into insulated ice houses, packed in sawdust, and kept frozen for months at a time. Before refrigerators, an entire industry existed just to deliver blocks of ice door to door in horse-drawn carts, refilling household ice boxes daily. Fall through the ice while cutting it, and there was no rescue team coming. It was one of the deadliest seasonal jobs in existence. Pinsetter. In early bowling alleys, pin setting was often a job given to children as young as 10, crouched behind the pins waiting to reset them by hand after every single throw. Get too slow and the bowler in the next lane would start yelling. Get too close and a stray pin could seriously injure you. Pin setters worked entire evenings hunched over in cramped pits, resetting pins hundreds of times per shift for pocket change. Automatic pin setting machines eliminated the job almost entirely within a few decades, but for a stretch of bowling history, a child's hands were the technology. Lector. In Cuban and Spanish cigar factories, a lector sat in an elevated platform above hundreds of workers and read aloud for hours at a time. Newspapers, novels, political speeches, workers voted on what got read, and factories genuinely competed to hire the best-voiced lectors. Some lectors became so beloved that cigar brands were literally named after the novels they read, immortalizing fictional characters on cigar box labels. Factory owners eventually banned the practice in several countries, worried that reading political material aloud was radicalizing the workforce. Reading books for a living got banned for being too dangerous. Let's move to jobs that get physically uncomfortable. Knocker-up. In Victorian Britain, knocker-ups walked the streets before dawn armed with a long pole and tapping specifically on bedroom windows to wake paying customers for work. Customers paid a small weekly fee, and the knocker-up would not leave until they saw a light or heard confirmation that the person was actually awake. Some knocker-ups managed entire streets of customers, timing their routes with military precision to hit every window before each person's specific shift started. Human alarms. In industrial Britain, human alarms took the job a step further, using dried peas shot through blowpipes directly at upper-story windows when a pole couldn't reach. Miss the window and you'd wake up the wrong household entirely, creating a wave of confused, furious neighbors stumbling outside in the dark. An entire profession existed solely to make sure factory workers weren't late, using nothing but sticks, peas, and extremely precise aim. Waking people up for money is strange. What comes next is stranger. Hunting. Rat catcher. Across Europe, rat catching was a professional hired by towns and wealthy households to hunt down and eliminate rat infestations using trained dogs, traps, and bare hands. Some rat catchers became local celebrities, staging public rat-killing competitions where trained terriers competed to kill the most rats in a timed pit. The most famous rat catchers were even employed directly by royal households, holding official titles like rat catcher to the queen. Yes, killing vermin for the crown was once considered prestigious enough to earn you a royal title. Leech collector. In 19th century Europe, leech collectors waded barefoot into cold marshes and ponds, letting live leeches attach directly to their legs to be harvested for doctors. Bloodletting was considered legitimate medicine at the time, and leeches were in such high demand that collectors sometimes used old horses as bait instead of their own bodies. Wading into a swamp covered in leeches is disturbing. Somehow, royalty made an even more personal job feel completely normal. Groom of the stool. In Tudor England, a groom of the stool held one specific responsibility, personally assisting the King of England during his most private bathroom visits. Despite the nature of the job, it was considered one of the most prestigious and sought-after positions in the entire royal court. The groom had private, unsupervised access to the king every single day, which made him one of the most politically powerful men in England. Nobles competed fiercely for this position because whoever controlled access to the king's most private moments often controlled access to the king's ear on everything else. A bathroom attendant became one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. Now let's talk about a job built entirely around death. Sin eater. In Wales and parts of England, a sin eater was hired to attend funerals and symbolically absorb the sins of the recently deceased by eating bread placed directly on the corpse's chest. Families believed this ritual transferred the dead person's unconfessed sins onto the sin eater, cleansing the soul before burial. Sin eaters were paid for the ritual, but were also treated as spiritually contaminated outcasts, shunned by their own communities for carrying the sins of everyone they'd ever served. Imagine a career where you're paid to eat sin off a corpse and shunned by society for doing your job well. You'd think that's the strangest job on this list. It's not even close. Resurrectionist. In Britain, resurrectionists worked exclusively at night, digging up freshly buried corpses from cemeteries and selling them directly to medical schools for anatomical study. Medical schools needed a constant supply of cadavers for dissection, but the law only permitted the bodies of executed criminals, creating a massive shortage. Resurrectionists filled that gap illegally, working in organized gangs, bribing gravediggers, and racing against grieving families who sometimes guarded fresh graves with loaded shotguns. Wealthy families paid for iron cages called mort safes to lock over graves, specifically to stop professional body thieves from digging up their loved ones. Stealing bodies from fresh graves for cash sounds like the peak of this profession. It's not. In 1820s Edinburgh, two men named William Burke and William Hare realized digging up graves was slow, risky, and increasingly guarded, so they skipped the digging entirely. Burke and Hare began luring vulnerable people, the homeless, the sick, drunks passed out in alleys, back to a boarding house, suffocating them, and selling the still fresh bodies directly to a prominent anatomy lecturer. They killed at least 16 people this way, and were paid handsomely each time, no digging required. The bodies were fresher because the victims were still alive minutes earlier. The scheme only unraveled when a lodger discovered a body hidden under a bed, and the resulting trial became one of the most infamous criminal cases in British history. Hare testified against his partner to save himself. Burke was publicly hanged. And in a final, almost poetic twist, Burke's own body was donated for public dissection. The body snatcher became the specimen. His skeleton is still on public display in Edinburgh to this very day. An entire underground economy was built on stealing the dead, until two men decided it was more efficient to simply stop waiting for people to die. So the next time you complain about your job, remember, at least nobody's paying you to eat sin off a corpse or hoping you don't get murdered for spare cadaver cash.